quick overview on what we're going to be covering this morning then. It's going to be an overview of the key topics, which we'll go through. So it's understanding fire doors, what the regulations for them, including Fire Safety England regulations and the Fire Safety Order, so the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005, any kind of common mistakes and how to avoid them, and then identifying, reporting and resolving fire door defects. We'll have a Q&A session at the end, and then there'll be a few closing remarks. It should last for about an hour, so it should be around 12:15 when we finish on that. If there are any further questions, if you want to put them all together into an email, and we can go through them, I can go through them with my team here, and we can get any responses out to you for that. Okay, so fire door awareness then. Why are we doing it? Okay, so fire door is an important element of the fire safety strategy of the building, be that a commercial building or a residential building. And it also includes the flats in the residential building and any kind of communal fire doors. So the communal fire doors would be stairwell fire doors, cross corridor fire doors, or on any kind of service cupboard or riser cupboards. Used correctly, they stop fires from spreading through a building, giving people time to escape and for the fire and rescue services time to attend and potentially save the premises. Right, they come in different kind of ratings. The most common fire door that you will see within the residential building will be a 30-minute fire door. However, there may also, depending on what the strategy is, depending on the height of the building, they may go to 60 or 120 minutes as well. All right, the locations where they're going to be installed. Fire doors are used as part of the building's passive fire protection system. So they're designed to contain fire in one part of the building to limit damage and protect escape routes, so everyone can leave the building safely. Right, this is called compartmentation. Fire doors are therefore normally required in all doorways leading to escape routes, and they're usually required for rooms that have a higher risk of fire starting. All right, essentially what they have to do is to protect that escape route so it's not compromised by fire or smoke, which will allow people to evacuate safely, but also allow the fire and rescue services to attend the fire safely so they can move throughout the building should they need to do so. Fire doors are built to hold back fire, generally for 30 to 60 minutes. You do have that higher ratings of those, so it could be up to 120 or even more. But this critical delay protects the escape route, giving people more time to evacuate. Where they're going to be put onto is fire doors will be put on any door that opens out onto that internal escape route, and in certain circumstances onto external escape routes as well. That will allow that escape route to be protected. There may also be cross corridor doors. These are installed to limit the amount of travel distance that people have to go from one area to another. Okay, so that compartmentation will be installed in there as part of the building fire strategy, which will limit the amount of travel people will do while evacuating a building into an unsafe or from an unsafe area into a compartmented area. So it forms part of that compartmentation and that passive fire protection throughout the building. The passive fire protection will also include things like fire stopping around services that are going around the building. It will form part of the compartmentation around the flats and any other kind of service cupboards that there is. Okay, I'm going to show you a quick video here. It's about 5 or 6 minutes long, and what it will show you is the importance of a fire door, how it works, and how it's gone through that test process. So this is a video that's produced by the testers of fire doors, and it will show you, demonstrate how a fire door operates and how good they can be.
Fire doors are designed to save lives and property. They're a vital part of a building's passive fire protection system. When they're installed correctly, they protect escape routes, prevent the spread of fire, and will restrict the amount of oxygen feeding the fire. But to perform fully, correct specification, fitting and maintenance is essential. If you take shortcuts or think you can save money by compromising or scrimping on specification, such as fitting incorrect or cheaper components, then it's time to think again. The building regulations across the UK are very clear. Any small differences in detail may significantly affect the rating. So what happens when you get it wrong? Sadly, it's only when a fire breaks out that the consequences of your actions are known. This short film was shot under test conditions at the UCAS-approved test house of Exover Warrington Fire and shows just what happens to fire doors when components are fitted incorrectly, or worse, not included at all. We tested 3 identical 30-minute fire doors, fitted into identical frames, all with correct 3mm gaps between the door and frame. Door A was glazed incorrectly, using toughened safety glass and with no intumescent seals in its glazing system. The intumescent smoke seals around the door were fitted in pieced sections rather than in continuous lengths along the 2 long edges and across the top. Door B was also glazed. This time, the correct fire-rated glass was used and was installed using an appropriate fire door glazing system. All other components were fitted as described in the manufacturer's instructions. Door C simulated a typical fire-rated entrance door installed in flats and apartments, complete with an ordinary letter plate and viewer, but with no intumescent seals between the door and frame. It's a situation we often find, where letter plates are fitted without any correct fire protection or where a non-fire rated door has been installed. As the test starts, smoke begins to appear from all the doors, as the facings on the doors burns almost immediately. Although this reduces on the central door B, it remains significant on the other 2 doors in the test. Almost immediately, cracking is heard coming from door A as heat reaches the glass. And after only 4 minutes, the glass dramatically fails and the door is engulfed in fire and smoke. Imagine if that door had been in a hotel corridor. The fire could have rapidly reached other parts of the building where occupants were trying to escape. A frightening situation. The door is sealed to allow the remainder of the test to continue. It's now 5 minutes into the test, and the letter plate on door C falls out, setting fire to the outside of the door. Imagine if this was in a block of flats. Fire and smoke would spread down the corridor, endangering the lives of other residents, as well as causing a potential significant fire risk to the fire and rescue authorities. To continue the test, the burning letter plate is extinguished, and the letter plate slot in the door is sealed. Our focus continues on door C, the door with no intumescent seals, which has not only allowed smoke to pour from its frame surrounds, but is now starting to glow red hot as the fire burns through from the edges. As this part of the test reveals, intumescent smoke seals are crucial in the installation of fire doors. Without them, not only is the fire rating of the door reduced by 50%, but by now, killer smoke would have been spreading to other parts of the building for over 15 minutes. The door is now sealed as we focus on door B for the remainder of the test. We're now approaching and then exceeding 30 minutes, and our correctly glazed and correctly installed door is still holding back the fire, doing what it was designed and engineered to do. It's 33 minutes before this door finally gives out. The test complete, the view from the fireside reveals more. You can see how doors A and C are completely burned through, threatening danger to the fire and rescue authorities, whilst the correctly installed door in the middle is charred but has remained intact. Remember, fire doors are not ordinary doors. They're engineered fire safety devices. Their correct installation and maintenance is vital in preventing fire and smoke from spreading, saving property and protecting lives.
Okay, as the video demonstrated there, it shows the reliability of a correctly installed fire door with all of the correct component parts to it. But it also shows the danger of a fire door that has either been installed incorrectly or does not contain all of the component parts. And we'll go through the component parts as we go through this now. Okay, so whose responsibility is it to ensure that those fire doors are installed correctly and that they are compliant to current legislation and guidance, and also that they're going to work correctly in the event of a fire. Okay, so as set out by the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005, building operators in England and Wales should appoint a responsible person to manage all fire safety precautions, including fire doors. Now, the responsible person will generally be the freeholder, as they have overall responsibility for the building. They may use agents on their behalf who will carry out maintenance, who will manage the building. However, overall responsibility will fall to that responsible person, and they have, in the eyes of the law, from the Health and Safety Executive, plus the fire authorities and the courts, they will have that overall responsibility for the safety of that building, be that in fire safety or health and safety as well. Their legal responsibilities include a duty to reduce the risk of fire spreading within the premises, and fire doors play an important part in reducing this risk. Where necessary, in order to safeguard the safety of relevant persons, the responsible person must ensure that the premises and any facilities, equipment and devices provided in respect of the premises under the order are subject to paragraph 6 under any enactment, including any enactment repeated or revoked by this order. Okay, so they have that overall responsibility for fire safety. So the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order ensures that a fire risk assessment is carried out of the building, and it also ensures that any installations within that building that are in relation to fire safety are inspected and maintained on a regular basis. All right, it doesn't go into detail on how that should happen or any kind of frequency of that happening. All right, it says that they need to be done on a regular basis. Other legislation may say for buildings of a certain height where there is a regime that needs to be put in place for inspection of fire doors. However, the fire safety order is just on that regular basis. How that is interpreted is entirely up to the responsible person and their agents. But they are to ensure that those are inspected and maintained correctly. They also have a duty to ensure that those escape routes for the building are kept clear. Now, that is kept clear of any kind of obstructions, physical obstructions, but it's also to ensure that they are kept clear of any of fire and smoke that may limit or the evacuation of people. Okay, so as we said before, the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order applies and compliance is mandatory. And the Fire Safety Order applies to all business premises, premises used for charity or voluntary work, public buildings such as schools, hospitals, leisure centres, etc., accommodation for paying guests such as self-catering units, camp or caravan sites, hotels, and also it applies to the communal areas of HMOs, blocks of flats and masonettes. Now, what the Fire Safety Order, it applies to there, the Fire Safety Act 2021 came out, and what that did was clarify certain parts of the Fire Safety Order. And it says that the Fire Safety Order applies to, first, the external walls of a property and any attachments to it, but it also applies to the flat entry doors. Okay, and it applies to those individual flat entry doors to ensure that they are compliant and that they are at least a 30-minute smoke protected fire door. We then had the Fire Safety England regulations, which came out in 2022, or were started to come out in 2022, but were then enacted in 2023. And what that did was split buildings into certain heights. So this only applies to residential buildings, but what it has done is split those buildings into different heights of risk. So you've got below 11 metres, buildings above 11 metres but under 18 metres in height, and then you've got buildings 18 metres or above in height. The way that is measured then, it is measured from the ground to the floor plate of the highest habitable story. Okay, so anything on the top, so any kind of plant rooms that are on the roof, they don't count. So it goes to the floor plate of that highest habitable story. If there is a basement that is above ground level, all right, so as you certainly see in London at times, or the building's being built on a hill, if that basement or lower ground floor is above ground level, that must be counted within the building. Okay, so that puts some buildings up a level of height. They may not be expected to do so. And what it did say was that for buildings of all height, information needs to be passed to residents on the importance of their fire doors and the fire safety instructions for the residents. So that information will say what their fire door, so their flat entry door, should provide them, what kind of components need to be installed on that door, and how to look after that door, and what to do if there is any damage to that door that may make that door non-compliant. And that goes for buildings of all heights. So that's buildings below 11 meters as well as the other two parts to it. What it doesn't do, though, is it doesn't discharge the responsibilities of the fire safety order. So the fire safety order has said that buildings, regardless of height, those flat entry doors and the communal fire doors do need to be maintained on a regular basis. So that maintenance will require some form of check or assessment of them to ensure that they're still working correctly. So for buildings above 11 meters but under 18 meters in height, there is a requirement now, once again, to provide that information, as we said before, for the buildings under 11 meters, but there's also a requirement to do an annual fire door inspection of the resident entry doors and a quarterly inspection of the communal fire doors. So the communal fire doors, as I said before, will include all stairwell fire doors, cross corridor fire doors, and any kind of service or riser covered doors. Now, these inspections don't have to be done by a professional, but they do need to be done by a competent person. So someone who has gone through some form of training that they are competent to carry out those inspections. For buildings over 18 meters, okay, they still require the information about the fire safety and the requirements of the fire doors to the flat. They also require the annual flat entry door inspections, the quarterly communal door inspections, and then there are several other parts of that, which include things like property information box, secure information box, wayfinding signage, etc., but are not especially relevant to the fire door piece. Okay, so where we're looking at is any building above 11 meters requires an annual flat entry door inspection and the quarterly communal door inspection. The reason behind those kind of timings, the frequency of those inspections, is because the communal fire doors will be trafficked generally more than the flat entry doors, because you've got more people that are going to be moving throughout those, or they are doors to particular high-risk areas such as electrical cupboards, plant rooms, and riser cupboards. Okay, as I said, the fire safety regulations apply to any residential building with 2 or more dwellings in it, and that's the responsible person should provide all the information. Blocks of flats then should have had a fire risk assessment as per the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005, and this risk assessment should detail which doors are required to be fire doors and what fire door rating each door should have. During the risk assessment process, those doors will be looked at, the communal fire doors. They will look for it, see if there's any kind of significant findings, any kind of hazards on those doors as part of their inspection. However, it's not a fire door inspection per se, so they may also recommend that an additional fire door inspection is carried out if there are a lot of issues with the fire doors on that, so that a more granular assessment can be carried out, which is looking more deliberately at those fire doors. So over 11 meters, quarterly and annual fire door inspections. All of those fire door inspections should be recorded. Okay, so they should be recorded and then maintained in a log for that. What will happen is that fire and rescue services, who are the enforcing authorities for all fire issues in the country, will require that people those to be checked if they were doing an inspection on the building. Okay, so they do want to see that happening on there. Okay, so identifying fire doors. If you're going around your building, you want to see what it exactly is a fire door within the building. There are certain ways you can tell if you can identify a fire door. Now, some of these are for new fire doors or newly installed or installed in the last couple of years. There may be older fire doors, and we can go through those in a bit to see how you can identify them. What you do have is you have the rating of the doors. So when we're talking about doors, it will be FD, all right, so 30. So an FD 30 door is a 30-minute fire rated door. FD 30 with an S following it is a 30-minute fire door, which has smoke protection on it as well. Okay, so the smoke protection is interruption strips and cold smoke seals, which we'll see a little bit later on. Once again, that goes for FD 60S, FD 120S. And there may be varying reasons why a fire door is installed without smoke protection. Okay, but generally what you will have throughout a residential block of flats is a smoke protected door installed, and certainly for all flat entry doors, and for the vast majority of doors, they will have that smoke protection. Any differences in that will normally come from the fire strategy, and it may be to initiate alarms, to initiate smoke control systems. However, as a default, they will be smoke protected doors. So what you have on new doors, or fairly new doors, is there will be some form of certification label or sticker or plugs on there. Okay, and as you can see from the screen there, certification labels that are installed at the top of the door or at the bottom of the door. Okay, and this will tell you that what the rating of the door is, who the manufacturer is, and where it can be installed. So that will give all of that essential information on that. And it will also confirm if it is compliant with British standards, with the guidance at the time. You may also have a plug that are installed in the doors. Okay, and these are just drilled in as a small plug. And if you look on there, it's the British Woodworking Federation. They will have little plugs in there that will tell you what those doors are installed. So it's exactly the same as certification. It will give you the fire rating of the door, if it's a smoke sealed door, and if it complies with the current regulations. These may be in different places. So as I said before, they may be at the top of the door, and they may be on the door leaf on the inside, or they may be installed at the bottom. Certain times they may have been removed by the installer if they've had to make adjustments to the door. So they may not always be there. However, the installer should leave those in if they can possibly do so. Okay, so that's with newer doors. You will have that marking on there that will give you that assurance that that door is an FD30S door, for example. You see it's gone through that. And when a door is installed in a new build, or they are fully refurbishing that door will be installed with the frame as well. So everything together, and that will give you the certified fire door. Excuse me. That will give you the certified fire door. So that includes the door leaf, the frame, and all of those component parts. So hinges, self-closers, strips and seals. That certification comes from that everything has been tested together. So when we saw that test previously in that testing condition, that door, so door B, the door that was installed correctly, that was tested with its door frame, with all of the parts that we've gone through together. If there are parts added to that door, okay, that then changes what the certification of the door is. For older doors, because buildings haven't only been built in the last 5 to 10 years. For older doors, they may still have fire doors installed throughout them. Now, they've been installing fire doors to blocks of flats for many years. Okay, what it might not have is it may not have a marking on there to say that it's a fire rated door. Okay, and so there are two main types. Notional fire doors and nominal fire doors. Notional fire doors are older doors that met previous standards and can still be effective if well maintained, although they may lack modern features, for example, intumescent strips. Nominal fire doors, on the other hand, are built to provide fire protection but haven't been formally tested. These doors are made from solid timber and require proper installation, hardwood lipping and intumescent seals to ensure safety. Both types play an essential role in safeguarding lives and property in a fire. So what you have on an older door, on an older block of flats, is you may have what is called a notional fire door. It met with the previous regulations, so it will be a fire door, okay, as long as it comes up to certain standards, all right, and that would generally be more than 44 millimeters thick, made of a solid hardwood with a hardwood frame as well. While they may be suitable if they're not warped or have large gaps, any required replacement should be a modern fire-resistant door. Fire replacement should always be a certified fire doors, not ordinary doors, to ensure safety standards are upheld. What you can do though with a notional fire door is it can have upgrades to that door, because it may have been installed without intumescent strips or cold smoke seals. It may have been installed with 2 hinges. Okay, so as long as 3 hinges are installed on there, installing the intumescent strips and cold smoke seals. Previous type of cold smoke seal and that kind of smoke seal and protecting the door was using a thicker door stop around there. So the door stop was not only to stop that door from opening out completely, but it was also there to provide protection on that. Okay, gaps around doors. Because most doors are made of a timber, all right, there is an issue where doors can expand and contract due to weather conditions. All right, so if it's cold, heat, damp, etc., may cause that door to slightly expand and contract as you go through. However, what you are looking for is ensuring that there is a gap of less than 4 millimeters around the side and the top of the door. The gap underneath, so the threshold gap can be slightly larger, but it does depend on the door. So what the guidance says from the Fire Safety England regulations is that that gap should be as small as possible, all right, which is not ideal as it doesn't give you a more specific measurement. However, we work, and London Fire Brigade certainly work, about 8 to 9 millimeter gap at the bottom of the door, all right, is sufficient. However, it should be minimized as much as it can. Those can be mitigated in certain ways, and there are certain products you can use if you can't adjust that door any further. So there are some products that can be used to minimize the gaps, certainly around the top and the sides. And then underneath, there are things like drop-down seals or threshold bars that can be installed to minimize that gap. Most new buildings now, certainly if they're high-rise, will be installed with drop-down seals on the resident flats, okay, because there is that requirement to keep it less than 3 millimeter gap where there is a smoke control system installed. All right. Okay, hinges. 3 hinges should be installed, and those 3 hinges will need should be made of a metal that has a melting point above 800 degrees centigrade. Brass and steel both have a melting point above that point above 800 degrees. So what you will see on modern hinges is they will have a CE number on it, or they'll have the BS number on there, which will tell you that that is a fire rated hinge. Older hinges won't have that installed. They won't have that marking on there. They didn't put the markings on until about 10, 12, 13 years ago, something like that. So those older hinges may not have that marking on. That doesn't necessarily mean that that hinge is not a fire rated hinge. As I said before, previous standards still require fire doors to be installed on flat entry doors and within those communal doors. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a fire rated hinge. It just means that the person who is inspecting the door or is assessing the door can't see that confirmation. So a brass or steel hinge should still be sufficient. However, the recommendation would be is that you do change that hinge when you're carrying out refurbishment to the door. So as long as it is brass or steel, to ensure that. The reason it's got 3 hinges on them is to have that element of redundancy. The only time when it doesn't require 3 hinges on a fire door is for those smaller fire doors that you sometimes get for an electrical cupboard or a riser cupboard, all right, where they're kind of a half-size door. Right, they can still have 2 hinges on them. All the other ones need to have 3 to have that redundancy in case one hinge fails in the event of a fire. So it's still going to be, the door will still hold up to ensure that it is protecting that escape route. Markings on there, when they have the markings, all right, they will go through a series of compliances to say what's compliant. So it'll give you the strengths, it will give you the fire rating. As you can see on this steel hinge, it's got a 260-minute fire rating on it. It's got the CE marking that says it is compliant to European regulations, and then it's got the BS number on there as well to say it's compliant to our British standards as well. All right, so that's suitable then to install on those doors. Self-closing devices. Okay, now all residential flat entry doors should have a self-closing device. All cross-corridor doors or stairwell fire doors should also have a self-closing device installed. Riser cupboards, service cupboards, etc. do not need to have a self-closer installed, okay, because those doors are locked and they're not being trafficked regularly. Okay, so it does depend on the door and what it needs. Okay, there's several different types of closers that can be installed. The most common one you see is the overhead type closer, as you see in the picture, the first picture there, second picture, and a concealed overhead closer in the third picture. Those are the most common type. They're the cheapest ones to install, and that's why they're fitted. They're also the easiest ones to maintain. Now you can have concealed closers installed on a fire door. So we've got the concealed. The last picture, the one on the right hand side, is a concealed closer, overhead closer. However, the most common kind of concealed closer you'll see will be between the door leaf and the frame, and it's the third picture in there, which is the Perco chain type. Now, a single chain type like the one pictured is no longer compliant to building regulations. They've been taken out of building regulations about 13 years ago. They were removed. The reason why they were removed is because of the way it operates. It's a chain. It will lose strength over the passage of time, okay, and which will cause the door not to fully close. So when you have a self-closer installed, what it needs to do, it needs to shut the door, defeating the latch from any angle. Okay, so that's basically fully open, half open, quarter open, and then just open to ensure that it fully closes the door. So it does need to defeat that latch as well. So single chain closers over the passage of time lose the strength and will no longer fully close the door. Generally where they get caught is they won't defeat that latch. There are some some concealed, look similar to a single chain closer that can be bought, okay, but they are very expensive. You can also have double chain closers as well. Reason a double chain closer will have that 2 actions. So one chain will close the door, the second chain will overcome the latch, so it gives you that strength. However, once again, because it's a chain, it will eventually lose its strength, okay, as the passage of time, and then start to fail. When we're doing inspection, but where there becomes a little bit of a grey area is that building regulations are not retrospective. So when you look at a building now, okay, if it's built 10, 15, 20 years ago, it does not have to comply with current building regulations. Otherwise, buildings would have to keep being knocked down and then built all over again. So the way we assess it is that if a single chain closer, such as the Perco type indicated there, still fully closes the door, it is still compliant as per the regulations. And it is so much so that when the government put out their fire safety guidance on the fire safety regulations, when they put out the information sheet about fire doors, they included a picture of the single chain pergo type, which is exactly the same pictures I've included in this presentation. So it is still compliant as long as it fully closes the door and overcomes that latch from all those angles. However, what we will say within the inspection is that these are no longer compliant with building regulations, and they should be considered that they are changed once they stop operating correctly. So the most common types then are those overhead door closers, and what you need to look for if you're carrying out those is any kind of damage to those reports, to those overhead closers. So if they've been removed completely, obviously that's non-compliant. If they have been unscrewed from the base or from the door or from the frame, those are non-compliant as well. Intermittent strips and cold smoke seals. Okay, intermittent strips and cold smoke seals are put around the door, top and the sides. Okay, they can either be installed on the door or they can also be installed on the frame, should they wish to do so, depending on how easy it is for them to install it. Top picture there is an intermittent strip. Excuse me. So the intermittent strip generally will go below the cold smoke seal, and the way that operates then is once it reaches a certain temperature behind the door, so where the fire is, that will expand and then block any kind of gaps that there are around the door. So they go top and bottom, top and sides. Generally won't go on the bottom because it's more difficult to open the door to be able to operate it if they do go around it like that. So they are generally top and sides. So they operate they initiate as soon as that heat gets to a certain temperature. All right, that's a very high temperature. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'm sure if anyone's asking, I can look that up for you. So once that gets initiated, that blocks it. However, to prevent the smoke from escaping before that heat reaches that temperature, so the fire is in another location within the flat. All right, so it's not right at the door, which is unlikely to start right at that door. Generally, there is some form of protection within the flats that stops a fire starting right at that door, unless it's been done deliberately or there is some other incident that's caused that. It is a cold smoke seal. Cold smoke seals come in a multiple different kinds of designs. The most common ones you see are similar to the ones down on the photo below the intermittent strip. These are a combined intermittent strip and cold smoke seal. You can also install them separately should you wish to do so. And they look a little bit like a brush, so a kind of toothbrush effect. All right, and what that does is that blocks the gap around the door, between the door and the frame, and prevents cold smoke, so the colder smoke that's coming through it, escaping into the escape route before the intermittent strip initiates. Now, as I said, they can come in various different designs. So you get the kind of brush types. There are also fins that look kind of like a shark fin going through it and made of rubber, and variations of both of those. As I said, these can be installed retrospectively. So you can install a intermittent strip and you can install a cold smoke seal retrospectively onto that building. But what they do need to be done in is as much as possible in one single strip. Okay, so they're not to be broken up into separate parts. We saw that on the video. One of the doors had strips that were broken up, all right, particularly around that window, that glazing, and that caused it, one of the reasons why it failed. Letterboxes. Okay, letterboxes form an important part of the fire safety within that building. All right. Now, you can buy fire-rated letterboxes. All right, they will have intermittents within them, and that will need to be installed by a specialist contractor on there, and they need to ensure that they close front and back. Okay, so the front side and the back side, all right, and generally they will be sprung as well to ensure that they don't open up. So from the video of the test conditions, the letterbox that was installed there, which was a non-compliant letterbox, only kept the fire back for about 5 minutes before it fails, and allowing that fire and smoke to penetrate into that escape route and to spread throughout the block. All right, so it is a vital part of the fire protection to the building. So again, they should be made of a material that provides that suitable fire rating. As I said before, brass and steel both have that melting point above 8,000 degrees. Glazing. Glazing can be installed in fire doors. That includes both flat entry doors and communal fire doors. In fact, it's very common in communal fire door because you need that kind of vision panel throughout to see. So glazing can be installed. However, it does need to have fire rated glass in it, which is normally marked up. As you can see there on the photograph, there will be a marking to say this is fire rated glass. So we'll have the CE mark on it. May also have the British standard mark on it, and we'll say what kind of fire rated glass is on. It also needs to be installed correctly, and all of the parts to it need to be installed and also be fire rated as well. Okay, so that will be checked on fire door inspections to ensure that fire rating of that glazing and its system to install it is fire rated, and it's also not damaged. So if the glazing is moving up and down, or there are cracks or anything to it, that then may mean it needs to be replaced. Georgian wire, which is an older form of safety glazing, is also compliant, but to certain limits on that, which will come from the fire risk assessment if there are excessive areas of glazing with Georgian wire installed in it. It is quite a lot. It's not just a window or a vision panel that it may be on there. So the Georgian wire is the glazing with two parts of glazing wire in between those in small squares. It looks a little bit like chicken wire. Okay, and that provides the safety for it. Signage. Okay, so all fire doors, communal fire doors, require that signage installed. Fire doors keep locked. That is for riser and service cupboards. All right, fire doors keep closed is for other forms of fire door, so those communal or stairwell doors, ones that are trafficked regularly. The fire doors keep locked. As I said before, where you have self-closing devices, that riser and service covers do not require a self-closing device. That is because those are kept locked when they're not in use. So when there are people working in those areas, so you've got contractors coming in, all right, they'll open the door, carry out their work, they then close the door and lock that behind them. So those doors will always be kept closed. So there is no requirement to have that self-closer on there. The requirement for the self-closer is on doors that are trafficked more regularly, and then maybe the opportunity for people to leave those open. You also need to ensure that any kind of communal doors are not being wedged open, have any kind of holding open device on there, unless it is linked into a fire alarm system. Okay, so some buildings may have fire doors that are linked into the fire door system, will be kept open for that period of time. But if you are coming across doors that are being wedged open by residents, they need to be removed, and the residents need to be informed that they shouldn't be doing this. Okay, when you're looking at it, it's checking for damage and any kind of alterations. Most damage will be easily visible when you're going through. So that's damage to a self-closer. It's not operating correctly, so it's not closing the door fully. You'll be able to see that as you approach it. The door's not closed. There must be a reason why it's not closed. There may be more damage to the door that you need to look a little bit closer at, which may become more apparent on that more, on an inspection to it. So there may be damage to the superficial damage to the door that's not going to make any effect, but needs to be noted. There may also be some further damage that may compromise the door. And from the picture, you can see the larger picture on there with the two holes that are going in through the fire door. This is generally what happens when a self-closing device has been changed on a door. So that originally door looks like it would have had a kind of Perco single chain type closer, which would have been drilled in through the door. Okay, and that mechanism is held within there. It's then been removed to be replaced with a different self-closing device, but that door has not been then remediated afterwards. There's not much remediation that could happen to that door. Okay, that door now has been compromised and would have to be replaced if it is in that kind of condition on there. All right, because there's not much a fire door installer, carpenters, and similar will be able to do to that door to ensure that it then comes back up to the standard it was before. So it may be that if self-closers do need to be replaced or changed, is if it has got a single Perco type closer in there, is to leave that closer in place and then install an overhead closer as well. That will ensure that that won't create the issue that you've got there, where the door would have to either be remediated or in this case would have to be replaced. So when you're looking at doors then for damage, you're looking at a door closer, looking at any kind of door furniture, so handles, etc., to see that not damaged. It's important to remember the frame is still part of the fire door complete. Okay, so it's still part of that installation, so that frame also needs to be checked for any damage on that. Looking at the glazing, see that it's not cracked or damaged in any way. Also that it doesn't move. Okay, so if you slide it up and down to ensure that stays secure. Strips and seals aren't damaged, haven't been removed. Any kind of damage to the door, as we see before, where there have been some changes to the door, and alterations. So when you're talking about alterations, it's things like putting cat flaps in. Cat flaps generally will not be fire rated. There are some that have some form of fire rating. However, I would not recommend that they're installed onto flat entry doors because it's always going to put a point of weakness onto that door. Alterations as well is if someone has replaced their door without going through the proper process. If they've replaced their door with a UPVC door, it is very unlikely that that is going to be fire rated. Okay, there are very few kind of UPVC doors that have any form of fire rating for them, and they're very expensive. So generally a UPVC door would be a door that's designed for the door of a house, for example. As I said before, all of these checks should be recorded in some form of checklist. Okay, how that is done is entirely up to the person who is carrying out those checks. Once that checklist is done, any form of damage or any kind of repairs, remediation that needs to be done, action plans should be put in place to ensure that that action plan is then enacted, but it also provides evidence should the enforcing authorities come along and they want to check to make sure that you're carrying out what you said you are going to do. Okay, that's it for the presentation. I do have Q&A available, so let me see if that works. Okay, so if you want to put a question in, you can put the question into the chat or to the Q&A chat, which I've just enabled there. Let's have a look, see if anyone's coming into the chat as well. Okay, has anybody got any questions for the chat? Okay, as I said before, this will be recorded, so it will be available for you. If people do have questions afterwards and they want to put it together into an email or anything like that, we will go through any kind of questions and we will get back to you on those ASAP. If I need any further advice, we've also got. Yeah, Johnny, I will be able to share. I'll email you a copy of those check sheets across to you as well. That's come across from the chat there. Just, are you able to share a copy of the check sheet that we can use? Yeah. Okay, there's nothing else for us, as I said. Okay. Yeah. Also, what is an ordinary considered an acceptable interval when they mean regular? That was kept deliberately vague on there. So, but as I said before, it does not need to be done by a professional person. What you may want to have done is you may, particularly on buildings under 11 meters, is you may want for the flat entry doors and for the communal doors, is you may want to have a professional person come in and do an initial inspection on those doors, which will give you a baseline on where you are at. But you may want to carry out those inspections yourselves following that initial inspection. Now, where it can be done is it can be done in things such as property inspections. You can carry out a check on the communal fire doors at that stage. Now, with the residence entry doors, that's more difficult because obviously you have to gain access into that. And what the legislation, so the Fire Safety England legislation says, is that for those buildings under 11 meters, is you've got to provide that information, which is telling the residents what to do. Okay, it may be that if they're renting from the landlord will be carrying out their own internal inspections as well. All right, they carry out those checks. It is vague, so it is just to ensure that, particularly on the communal fire doors, is that they are checked regularly throughout. So that may be 3 months, 6 months, however you deem that what is acceptable. What you need to remember, though, on a residential building is that has much less trafficking than other buildings. So where a commercial building and buildings such as hotels, schools, hospitals, they will carry out weekly, monthly fire door inspections, is because they're getting traffic much more and they're much more likely to put damage on that. On a residential building, there is much less risk for damage on a communal fire door unless there are specific reasons why it would be. Okay, so maybe resident, there have been antisocial behaviour, etc., within that block. Sorry, I can't give you a more detailed response to that, but that is deep down there. So I would say if on the property information, property inspections, and on a 3 to 6 monthly basis. Okay, so lastly, we don't have staff on site. How is it expected that 3 monthly checks are undertaken? As I said before, it can be done on property inspections that are carried out by property managers on there. But it is a requirement of the fire safety order that those are checked on a regular basis. The regularity is down to the responsible person, how that is done, how that is managed. But it is part of the duties under the fire safety order on that, which is quite clear that it does need to happen. Okay, thank you for joining me today on this. As I said, we will get a copy across to you guys, a recording, and if there are any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. We can get on that and get that to you. All right, thank you.